Ink and Echo number 49. What's up? Where are my good boys at? Where are my good girls at? Where are my good dogs at? You know who's listening to the Ink and Echo podcast. Welcome. I'm Josh. I'm just on the mic by myself at the moment, just for this intro. Andy Othling, my co-host and beloved friend, is touring with the Hotel Neon guys. He's doing his Lowercase Noises tour with the Tasselmeyer brothers and Stephen Kemner, and we're going to hear from them in just a moment. Just a brief little check-in from the road. They recorded from their vehicle and called me in, so that's fun. You'll hear that in a minute. But it's not exactly a guest, but just sure, it's a guest. My friend Tyler Barstow, who has been on this show before, works for Vinyl Me, Please. And this occasion was a little different for our show, where he and I were just sitting outside at my house around a fire pit, and we had just been scheduled to hang out for the evening, but we decided to record our conversation. And it centers a lot around a film that you'll hear plenty about called Enter the Void, and we do spoil it a good deal. So if you have not seen the movie and you don't want it spoiled, maybe move on. Or, skip the parts that are about the film. But to be clear, this isn't a podcast just about movies. I mean, we dig pretty hard on this episode in particular into one specific movie, but this movie is such that it takes us to many other places in the conversation, and it goes real deep and real heavy, I guess. Now, I don't know, heavy, seeking truth. I don't know. We talk about good stuff. So all that to say, don't be deterred just because the initial premise of this conversation is about a movie that maybe you haven't seen. So stick through it or fast forward the parts about the film, whatever you want to do. But that'll be in a little bit, my talk with Tyler. Hey, everybody, I want to tell you something. I want to highlight this in your brain right now. This week, July 10th to July 14th, Friday the 14th, I have yet another new short story that has come out, and it is free this week for Kindle. So go to Amazon.com, search for Josh Gaines, or search for, here's the title, Poisonous Snakes of the Midwest. I know that's a curious title. It's not a nature book. It is a work of fiction, and it's fucked up, guys. I mean, it is and it isn't. It's not just messed up for the sake of being depraved and vulgar. But it's dark. It's a heavy story about a mentally disturbed man, and he does some real bad things, and some interesting things happen. But so, I don't know if you like Flannery O'Connor, if you like Chuck Palahniuk, if you like Bret Easton Ellis, or maybe even Cormac McCarthy a bit. It's I'm not comparing myself to those great authors. I just mean that's the sort of thing I read, and that's the sort of thing I aspire to write. So if you are a reader, or if you like me or our show, I mean, you know what? Even if you won't read it, please just go download it. I mean, it's free. It costs you nothing, and it will help my downloads. But of course, I would love if you read it. It's just a short story. You could blow through it in about 30 minutes. And also, while it is built for Kindle, you don't need to own an Amazon Kindle reading device in order to read this or any of their other stories. They have got tons of free reading apps available on their site for iPhone, Android, iPad, desktop, MacBook, all sorts of things. So just about any digital device you have, you do have a free way to read this story and others. And hey, if you read it and if you like it, then please go leave a review on Amazon, or just leave it some stars. You know, say something nice about it. Share it with some folks, because yes, it's here's the thing. It actually costs me money to put these out. I mean, I'm not being... Anyway, it's like I'm putting these out at a loss to myself, just because I would like to get them out in the world. So at this point, my desire clearly is not to make money from them, but I just value these stories a lot. I put a lot of heart and work into them, And, on some level, I think they're good. I think they're worth your attention and your time. So if that's not a hard enough sales pitch, I don't know what is. So please go download Poisonous Snakes of the Midwest this week only. It's free. Next week, it's 99 cents. Still not that big of a deal. But anyway, thank you so much for doing that. Thank you to those of you who have read The Golden Calf and some of my other stuff. And I'll put a link in the show notes as well to the Kindle free reading apps and to Poisonous Snakes of the Midwest. Okay, now I will get out of here. We're going to immediately after this check in with Andy and the boys on tour, and then we'll jump into the real meat of the episode with my talk with Tyler Barstow. Good day.
Okay.
All right.
Are you ready?
We're doing it. This is the Ink and Echo, the most dangerous podcast recording ever.
Yeah, so describe for the listeners at home what is happening
All right.
in your vehicle.
So there are four grown-ass men in a truck hurtling at almost 80 miles an hour down I-10 towards Austin. So, because we're playing a show tonight in Austin. So we got a mic set up. We got Josh on the phone coming through the car speakers.
Got Mountain Dew in the back.
Mountain Dew for Mike.
Wired.
Yeah. So Josh, what do you want to know about what's happening here?
Well, fellas, what's it like to be on tour? What's it like to be a real band on #tour? No, I don't want to know that. Well, where have you been? What's been the best show? What's been the shittiest show or scenario?
All right, I want Mike Tasselmeyer here to talk. Let's have you lean up into the mic here.
Yeah.
Come on in.
Well, we started in good old ABQ almost 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
Just plug our stuff in, make sure it works, and then hit the road up to Denver to Mr. Josh Gaines' house.
Yeah.
It's lovely way to start the tour. And yeah, then we kind of just snaked our way through the Midwest up to Chicago area, down through Nashville. We're in New Orleans the other day, and now we're kind of on the home stretch here, heading through Texas.
What's your favorite show so far, Mike?
Favorite show so far? Honestly, Nashville.
Yeah.
We were kind of talking about this last night, but especially on these house shows, like just the vibe of the hosts and the audience is so critical.
Yeah.
And it was just, I don't know. The dude we were staying at, his house was just super cool, and he was really accommodating, and like, I don't know, he just seemed like he really appreciated it, and that just made a huge difference.
Yeah.
He was very knowledgeable about this music too.
Yeah.
He was very familiar with what we were trying to do, made the place very comfortable. I'd agree with that. Nashville was pretty great.
Yeah. And we got to see our good friend Dave Mantell.
Yep.
Had some good hangs in downtown Nash on the 4th of July, so that was pretty cool.
Dude, so Josh, you asked about shitty shows, and I honestly don't think there has been one yet.
Yeah, there really hasn't been like a disaster or like
No.
anything going horribly wrong.
Well, and they've all been so different.
Right.
Like, the Atlanta one was very small and in a very outskirts area, but it was...
the people who were there were like super into it.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, it's like, yeah, there hasn't been a bad one yet, which is really sweet.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's great.
Maybe tonight will suck.
yeah, we probably just jinxed ourselves. Tonight's gonna bomb really hard. Yeah, man. What about you, Steven? Pipe up here.
I'd say Nashville was really cool. I liked Atlanta just because it was probably the most intimate space that we played, and like Mike said, everybody was super into it, and that was a lot of fun.
Wait, can we talk about New Orleans?
Well, we didn't play a show there. There's no reason to talk about it.
Well, Josh, there's some stories that Josh is gonna love. I know. I don't know how much we want to say.
I don't know how much I can say.
Yeah, because well, here. Long story short, we were hanging out in Bourbon Street on it was Thursday night.
Yeah.
And went to a couple jazz bars, and we were all pacing ourselves pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I was doing.
But then we went to one last bar, and we sat next to this guy and his girlfriend, and he was like totally drunk and gone. But he was like, "What are you guys doing here?" It's like, "Oh, we're on tour playing music." I'm like, "What did he say?"
He just said that
I respect what you guys are doing
Yeah.
or whatever.
he was really, for some reason, very appreciative of the fact that we were putting ourselves out there.
Yeah.
Going on tour. He was just very, I don't know why he was so enamored with what we're doing, but he was just very thrilled about the fact that we were putting our lives on the line, going out on tour and, taking our show on the road. And so he was so appreciative that he decided to buy multiple rounds of Jameson shots for the whole band. And we took full advantage. It was a great time.
Yeah.
Probably should not have taken the last one or two. But
Yeah.
Well, I think he thought that we were like playing in one of those bars. On
Oh, maybe.
So I think he like gave us a little more credit than we did.
Yeah.
I didn't have the heart to tell him we'd play
right. Or
really
he,
boring sad.
yeah, or he probably wouldn't even comprehend what we were telling him.
Yeah.
Amidst all those real musicians, and it was kind of embarrassing.
He was very appreciative, though.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that.
Yeah. And then we ended up getting back to the hotel, and Steven had a big gash on his leg.
Yeah,
that we don't know where it came from.
Giant slice in my front knee, and I have no idea where it happened or when it happened. But
It was a classically New Orleans experience.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah,
Wish you could have been there, Josh.
Yeah, me too. I'll have to hear what you said on the podcast because I could not hear any of what was told. All of a sudden the mic, or all I'm hearing is like someone sticking a microphone out into the blowing wind.
I had it right in front of the AC. Here, I'll turn that down.
yeah.
There. How's that?
We
Far superior.
tried to chill you down.
Awesome. Anyway, long story short, guy bought us 2 rounds of Jameson shots for no reason, and Steven got an unknown huge gash on his leg that we don't know where or how or why.
And then apparently poured a shitload of water all over the floor in the hotel.
Steven got back to the hotel room and just grabbed a bottle of water, stuck his leg out, and just dumped water all over the floor of the hotel.
I mean, A for effort, F for execution.
Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to make everything sanitary and clean up my leg, but
That was a great time.
Man, Steven can't hold his liquor, apparently.
Well,
he just loses his mind.
No, I mean, I was fine until that guy started buying shots, and then it was kind of game over.
Yeah.
What a cool town,
What a
though.
life you guys lead
Yeah.
on the road.
Yeah.
That's the ambient life, you know? Work hard, play hard.
What remains? How many days in what city?
So tonight is Austin. So tonight is the last night with all 4 of us. So Andrew and Mike are flying home tomorrow out of Austin, and then Steven and I are doing 2 more shows, just us in Dallas. So the day this comes out, we'll be playing in Dallas, and then Oklahoma City right after that, and then that's it.
That's it.
So we are on the last drive, just the 4 of us right now. So sad.
Yeah.
Wait, how? Okay, so the Tasselmeyers have been in the back seat basically the whole tour. How do you guys like the back seat of my truck? Is it cool?
It's great, man. It's honestly, it's a lot more fun back here than the one drive I did on this stretch was through western Nebraska.
Right.
After your house, Josh, and that was, yeah, that's really about all I have to say about
open
that part of the
space.
country.
Yeah.
I'm thankful to have seen it, but I prefer the comfort of the back seat to the boredom of western Nebraska landscape.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Right.
very comfortable truck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's very spacious.
I just want to hear compliments about my truck. That's all I want. Oh boy. Oh, and Josh. So Josh, you made me posters for this tour.
Yeah.
Right.
They've been selling really well. Like people are really stoked about it.
Sweet.
I was telling the guy. Well, so for people who don't know, like Josh, since we played at his house the first night of tour, he surprised me and got me made 25 hand screen printed posters for the tour. And I totally forgot that you could do that. So it's like, I think for each tour now, I want to have you do that for me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I would love to.
yeah. So thank you.
That got me
sir.
thinking I would like to do more of that for other bands, just come up with some designs, and since I have all the material.
Yeah. So any
If
bands
anything,
out
I
there, if you want Josh Gaines to design a poster,
Yeah.
get in touch with old Josh.
Yeah, people love that, like, the fact that they're all a little bit different.
Yeah.
Super unique and
Nice.
rare.
Well, and even for me, like pulling the next one out each night, I'm like, oh, nice. That one, like the one we gave to the host last night,
It was really cool.
it was like,
Yeah.
there were like gold swirls and like a circle around it.
Yeah.
It was
I could
sweet.
tell you tried really hard on that one. I could tell.
Yeah. So, thank
Oh,
you.
just an artistic genius, basically.
You're amazing.
Turning out gold.
King of the art.
What else do you want to know,
so-
Josh?
Well, so I'm going to tell a story that might get Levi in trouble, but that's fine. Because he played Denver July 5th. Just
Oh, yeah.
2 days after I got back from Audio Feed.
Did you go?
And yeah,
Cool.
yeah, it was in the most sweltering basement I've ever stepped
Oh,
into.
man.
Like, people were maybe going to pass out. And Levi was just drenched after his set. But
Oh.
anyway, the turnout was really good. Show went great. And then Levi was sleeping at my house that night. So we were hanging, talking, whatever. And then I was like, well, I have this marijuana joint. Would you like to consume some of it with me? And we each only did like 2 hits and got super high right away. And we both basically just like awkwardly shuffled to bed. I think because we were both so high we were gonna embarrass ourselves talking. Like, so it was like going to bed out of fear of not being an idiot in front of the other person. But it was fine because we were both in that headspace of just like, oh man, I'm way up here and I can't come down. So that was enjoyable.
Great job.
And the only reason, well, I mean, whatever. Levi will be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, so speaking of Levi, okay, well, all of us. So, Josh, you flew to Audio Feed to hang out with us at the festival. So now, like, what has it been, like a week since the festival?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that you have recuperated and all that, like, what did you think about your time?
Man, honestly, I probably wouldn't go again unless I had a really good reason. I mean, I don't mean to, I enjoyed myself and obviously really enjoyed time with you guys and watching your sets but as festivals go, it just seemed kind of slapped together and like a lot of money and effort to get out there for not much return. I don't know, but if like in some miracle future they're like, hey, Ink and Echo, come do a live show, like sure, I would go do that.
Start pitching that now.
We were talking about how it's a lot of, I feel like that festival is seemingly mostly defined by like hardcore and metal scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got that kind of dirty DIY vibe, which is fine and cool, but it's like not the sort of vibe I would pick or choose to. So I mean,
Festivals in general can be really hit or miss. I don't know. I have so many mixed feelings about festivals in general, and that was weird. That was the first time I've ever played at one, which was like totally different. It was hard to ever like totally be present there because we had such a late set. We were playing at like 11:30, and so like pretty much all day I was like trying to walk around and enjoy myself and be present, but I kept thinking about like, what do I need to do to get ready for our set tonight? And like just, I don't know, it was a lot of like mental energy expended to make that work. But
we were
cool
also,
experience.
We were also commenting on the fact that it seems like there were so many acts playing back to back and overlapping that pretty much right after everybody's set, there wasn't really an opportunity to meet a lot of people. And so I think that was a bit of a detractor for me personally. But
we're kind of spoiled in that regard with these house shows. It's like weird.
Everybody just wants to hang out afterwards.
Yeah, and it's cool.
Yeah.
I just have to say I almost missed an exit because I was not looking at my phone while doing this podcast. But I looked just in time to get off exit 695 here. LaGrange. We're going by LaGrange, Josh.
LaGrange?
Yeah, like the ZZ Top
The
song.
ZZ Top?
Yeah.
Oh man, you guys gotta stop in for some nice ladies or
Very sharply.
Oh, I know what he says. They got some nice girls over there, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Audio Feed was an interesting experience for sure.
Yeah.
I do have to say, like, all the logistical behind-the-scenes stuff were, like, so on point.
Yeah.
Like,
It was like the most well-organized show.
So, like, all the people were super nice, and they took care of it. Everything was, like, super easy.
Yeah.
So that was very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said it felt slapped together, Josh, but from a band's perspective, they did an excellent job taking care of us.
Yeah. Well, anything else you want to talk about here? Because I should focus on driving maybe and not kill us.
Right. No, I feel like we're good, especially since there's a 2-hour conversation after this with Tyler. So.
Yeah. I think I'll never ever meet Tyler or talk to him.
Yeah.
We've done two podcasts with him, and I have never even talked to him or met him.
Right. Yeah, it's unfortunate you guys' orbits never align.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep trying. Tyler, if you're listening to this, hello from me. Maybe someday in person.
To be continued.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, fellas, have a great drive.
Thank you.
Enjoy your day. Work hard, don't hardly work. I don't know.
Work hard and play hard. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, keep the Jameson away from Steven.
Yes.
The time.
And sharp objects away from his legs. Yeah. Sweet. All right. Slow Spaces Tour, Ink and Echo Podcast. Out. Peace.
All right. Yes. Out in the wild. Pod so hard.
Dude.
So we're out here in my backyard, sitting around a fire that's not currently lit. And Tyler and I were going to hang out tonight anyway. And I thought we should just record it. Because the internet needs more white guys talking about cinema.
Right. That's exactly what it needs.
But yeah, so we watched Enter the Void, a movie called Enter the Void, which is from, I don't know, 2014 or maybe
2011, 2009.
Is it that old? Okay.
I didn't it doesn't feel that old.
Right. So yeah, and kind of your idea was just to watch a couple films and regroup in a month and talk about it. And this was kind of our first round of doing that, specifically 2 films that we had not seen. And the other one, which we won't talk about tonight, is called Blowout by Brian De Palma from 1981. Great movie with John Travolta. But anyway, dang. Enter the Void was way different than what I thought.
Yeah, man. It was, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to expect, but yeah, man, that it kicked the shit out of me.
Yeah. So like basic premise, and it's okay if you spoil it. Like,
yeah, no. So the basic premise is there's a guy who lives in Tokyo named Oscar, and he is sort of a druggie. He's an addict / dealer.
Right.
His drug of choice is DMT, which adds a huge meta layer to this movie.
Absolutely.
And he lives in Tokyo. His sister is there, and he has a friend, a British friend, and the film basically opens with, I mean, there are other characters in the movie, but those are sort of like the three probably most important people in the movie. He basically, at the beginning, so he's been given this, what's the Book of the Dead?
Right, from a specific culture. I forget.
Yeah, I think it's like from Nepal or something like that. And so he's given this Book of the Dead to read from his friend, his British friend, who I think is a little concerned about him and his drug use. But he reads this book and then gets really high on DMT, presumably, and then gets a call from Victor, who's like kind of a secondary character, but he basically, the premise of the movie, sorry, I'm sort of like just listing everything out that happens. Basically, the premise is this guy gets killed in a botched drug deal and in a bar in Tokyo.
Within like the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, within the first 10 or like the first 15 or 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
And then his soul essentially disembodies after death and follows. First, he sort of goes back through his life. And then follows the fallout from his death through all of the characters that you met along the way, sort of in the historical review. Like, it's essentially like an extremely graphic Wikipedia page for about an hour of like, here's all the stuff that happened.
Right.
So he is a disembodied soul, tracing that around, and the Book of the Dead basically outlines this tension that spirits have after they've left their bodies, where they basically have the ability, by following these lights, to essentially reach a higher consciousness if they choose, or they can return to Earth. And so the tension in the movie, without spoiling it this early, is that you don't know it at first, or he doesn't. He's basically going through, the movie is basically him going through the process of digesting his life, which is supposedly what happens, is that you sort of go through and see the history of you, the fallout from the end of you, and then you make your choice, sort of, or you decide whether you are going to stay on Earth or go up to this like higher level of existence.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
And the movie, the rub of the movie is the mechanics of his life, the outworkings of it, and then his ultimate decision. So
right, yeah. There's a lot of deep concepts alluded to, which are only loosely played out, I would say. I mean, because there's the reference to DMT. There's obviously multiple references, but then the idea of reincarnation. He and his friend talk about. And sort of, having out-of-body experiences. And as you're walking along with this character through his revisiting his own life, there's these, relevant conversations about these things that he's currently going through. And his one friend with the long hair, don't recall his name, but they have this conversation walking down these steps about DMT specifically, right. And it's like, the high only lasts 6 minutes, but it's the same chemical that your brain delivers at the moment of your death.
Right.
Which that right there, I wanted to research more before we got on this, but I wonder if that's accurate. Is that actually true?
One of the interesting elements of this movie is that DMT is used is currently used in the treatment of addicts, and a lot of other situations as well. But so, I have a friend who used to be a big heroin user. And so they went down to this treatment facility in Mexico. And part of the treatment, there was a lot of other things, but part of the treatment was smoking DMT.
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to basically like eliminate these like chemical nodes in your brain that basically cause you to be literally dependent on heroin,
right?
On some level. So So the stuff about DMT is true as far as I have read. I've read up a little bit on it, but that it is essentially this kind of mind-opening drug that is also used in treating depression and other. It's like a therapeutic drug that's used. I mean, it's a natural drug technically. I mean, but it is. As far as I know, that what they were hinting at and maybe unsatisfyingly never followed. Well, not unsatisfying. They just never really. They sort of set it, but didn't spike it.
Sure.
But it was. There was this dude in this context who the thing he wanted the most was DMT, which is almost sort of an ancillary thing to a lot of the other shit that he was doing. It's like this oppositional thing almost to a lot of the other stuff that you encounter in the movie, which is super interesting. In that, like, DMT is meant for self-exploration on a real level almost, as opposed to like Molly or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Incidentally, we can go back to the film, but a great podcast episode specifically that touches on DMT is Pete Holmes talking to Reggie Watts.
Okay.
And they sort of go through, Reggie has done a lot of psychedelics, but anyway, DMT in every way I've ever heard it described, and I'd say this movie would be in agreement with that, is it's 0 to 100 immediately. You know, when you take a hit, it doesn't come on slow the way marijuana might. And also that you can have experiences that feel way longer than 6 or 10 minutes, which is kind of horrifying, but also kind of fascinating. And also, I mean, my assessment from what I've understood about the drug is just that it's something you use maybe a couple times in your life. It's not a regular.
No, it's not a thing that you're. It's not like a cigarette.
Yeah,
where you're like, oh, I'm going to go out in the backyard real quick and shoot up into the metaphysical atmosphere and then shoot back down.
Right. Like that's probably the way people break their brain is doing too much.
Yeah, it's too much acceleration, I think. Well, and it seems like, and these sequences in the movie, the animation sequences, right, where he's smoking it at the beginning and he's doing, he's up like in this incredible place. I mean, it's like this really emotional. The opening scenes of this movie are very emotional. I mean, the whole movie is incredibly emotional. I mean, they pulled off so many things right, but we'll get to that later. But he's shooting up into this like organic, like evolving environment, which I think intentionally sort of mirrors the rough structure of your ganglia. On some level, I mean,
what is that?
You're like your brain, just like the like threads of your brain.
Oh, okay,
I mean, it's like you have like, and it's a really incredible place. I mean, there's this. They use music really well in it, but there's a heaviness to it that also feels like a freedom, kind of, even as a viewer, you know. And the idea of, I mean, DMT is meant to. I mean, my friend who used it said that before he used it, he was an atheist. And after he used it, he said that he was like, I felt connected to something that like I cannot explain, and that is way more loving than I could even verbalize to you.
Right.
And he was just like, it was just like a radical. I don't even mean that in some sort of like Christologically redemptive way. What I mean, because he's not a Christian at all, but
that's not proof of God necessarily, but it's still interesting.
I think it's one of those things that it's like when you're there and you see it, it's similar. It's like it's like a kind of trauma probably, right? But maybe like a benevolent trauma where it's like when you're there and you see it happen or you experience it, it's way different than it is on paper,
right?
Kind of thing. And so, and I thought that even the opening of this movie captured that idea really well.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie did an incredible job at many things, but one of them was capturing drug experience on film from a first-person perspective.
Yes.
Which feels very hard to do.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. It was in the normal moments, in the moments when he's not sort of in that ethereal place, there would just be subtle things like a sort of buzziness around the edges of the picture, or weird stuff with lights flickering.
Yeah, or like they even did his like blinking sometimes.
Yeah, a little flash of black on the screen. Yeah. It's just, it's so fascinating that DMT or other things can open a section of your brain that is normally not accessible. It's like living in a giant mansion and there's a locked room and you don't have the key, and then someone gives you the key for 10 minutes and you can go look around. It's like, that's pretty incredible when you're thinking of our brains and the vastness, the places that they're able to go, but like we need these little things to unlock them.
Well, it's even, I mean, if you could go totally, and you think about it like, one of the weird things is that we have, especially, well, I guess in most societies, I mean, we have created a distance, a separation in personality between myself and my brain, right? Where it's like, we, on some level, mechanically, our brain is saying that about itself, which is crazy, right? I mean, on some level, our brain is the gentle Rosenberg here. I had to throw in a Men in Black reference, but it is, and it's like, the brain doesn't understand itself. And that's we don't need to go down that rabbit hole right now, but that's crazy to me. And I think that this movie touched on that a little bit, that like you have an operative, amoral human who essentially is just his brain on some level, especially in this movie. Right. It's like a consciousness, essentially.
Yeah. And
he's having to do things to get into himself, right? I mean, I think it's the same as, you know, our brains don't, I just did it again. I mean, it's like, we don't think about like, oh, I'm going to drive my car to the supermarket. I don't know who the fuck calls it supermarkets anymore, but like, I'm going to go to the grocery store. You don't think about you don't consciously think about or most people don't anyway, like the 50 ways you could die going to the grocery store and come back.
Right.
Because like there's a lot of stuff that if we were ingesting reality, I think as it really is, it would be impossible to get out of bed.
Oh yeah.
You know?
And so that does happen to people who are mentally broken.
Yeah.
They get stuck in thinking about those little possibilities.
And so this movie touched on that a little bit with the, I felt like both with the DMT and with this sort of floating spirit narrative driven, or this floating spirit driving the narrative. And you never really get to why the spirit goes where it goes at the times that it does. Although obviously cinematically you get it, script driven wise, like you need to see certain things to move the story along. But there's never really an explanatory device of like, in this reality in the movie that like you die and your spirit goes out, and it's like he's zooming across Tokyo.
Right.
Really just sort of whenever.
Yeah.
You know, like, and there's no, it's like on some level you have to accept the idea that he sort of knows what's going on all the time. But it breaks down. I mean, if you're going to deal with a thing like that in a film, like you've got to create some kind of dissonance between the idea of like all knowingness and view for the, you know, like camera lens scenes for the viewers, so they have any, you know what I mean? So
yeah, it was a very artful portraying, and they sort of used these almost like cinematic rules where, well, so just to explain it directly, when in the first 20 minutes of the film, when he's alive, you're seeing first person view, you're seeing as if from his eyes, but then in all the flashbacks, the camera is right behind, like right over the shoulder of the main character. So you literally see the back of this guy's head most of the time. And the other characters and his experiences are framed around that. So it's like this weird over the shoulder, you're experiencing it with him, which that in and of itself is a unique,
Yes.
technique to choose, and really worked well for what they were trying to portray. So it flashes back to his childhood, he and his sister, and then to adulthood while he's still alive, and the way in which it is cut and sort of the little snapshots of his life that they are giving the viewer were super jarring,
yes,
and traumatic, I would say, because I mean, on the one hand, you're seeing these little kids who their parents die very early on in the film. That's, you know that right away. And they're just left on their own, and they're very attached to each other, and they get separated. But it will just flash cut between these poor, innocent little kids who have no parents and who have a rough life to the incredibly broken lives they have as adults.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, maybe extra so as a parent, but that killed me.
Yeah.
Like, I did not want to see a little 5-year-old girl in great distress and then like jump cut to her on a stripper pole.
Yeah.
So in that way, I mean, it was emotionally affecting for sure, but also just a little too close to home.
Yeah, I mean, almost everything, I would say almost everything until that final sex scene in the movie was like violent. I mean, in its own way. I mean, there was a lot of like literal violence. But I mean, dude, it's like something's happening and it's like immediately the kid's back in the bath. Oscar's back in the bath with his naked mom.
Right.
And then it's, 2 minutes later, I mean, they went back to that car crash scene 6 or 7 times at least in the movie. And it's just like, there's nothing in this movie. I mean, it is very fairly unrated. I mean, in the sense that like, they don't leave, Gasper, the director, he doesn't leave anything out. Mm-hmm. Like the car crash scene is horrifying. Mm-hmm. And then these camera pans over their like mutilated dead parents, and the kids like covered in their parents' blood.
Right.
And his sister screaming, and I mean, it just never pans away. And I think it was a movie I would never watch again, but I would certainly watch once, because I think at least a sub-thread, like one thread of this movie is like, this is what reality is, right? So it's like if you're a kid who gets in a car wreck and your parents die in it,
right?
This is what it is.
Yeah, and there's no turning away.
Yeah, there's nobody there there's nobody there to like not to like refigure your parents' faces or like any of that stuff, right? I mean, and you start to over the course of the movie, I think, especially with the way that it's cut, like you said, and the pacing. I mean, dude, it is 2 hours and 23 minutes. It's like as long as a Lord of the Rings movie.
Yeah.
And it's this very patient pacing and reminding of these things. Like it's like tidbits that then get expanded upon a little bit and a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And you start to understand, I think, like, it might be the most brilliant portrayal of like real trauma and its effects that I've ever seen. As far as like, this stuff kicked the shit out of these kids.
Right.
And there was nobody there. Their grandparents put them in a foster home.
Yeah. And
whatever. And it's like, you start to think about, I mean, the fact that these kids are even moderately functional people is incredible. I mean, and it's that sort of the survival persistence that baked in with the fact that these kids, especially the boy, I think, like, because he was 2 years older, I think, or 2 or 3
Right.
years older than his sister, and he remembers all of it, like, photographically, right? And you're seeing all of it from his perspective, I think, in a lot of these flashbacks. And so, like you were mentioning, even with, like, the camera behind him, like, he is always behind him seeing something. And he was old enough, his brain was turned on enough, basically, like, it just, enough of it was working, that he had this burden on him that his sister also had, for sure, but it was different for her, I think, because I don't think she had literal images in her mind. I think she, in the same way that, like, it felt like he had, like, a Library of Congress, like, stack of, here's literally everything that happened.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like it pretty much is a life flashing before your eyes sort of thing.
Right.
Although portrayed in this, while he's floating around, supposedly he can access these memories or whatever. But yeah, it's funny that you say you wouldn't watch it again, because I felt exactly the same. I feel that 18-year-old Josh would have eaten it up. You know, I hadn't had as many life experiences by that point, wasn't a father or a husband. And so, you know, in the era where I was watching Train Spotting, and which this movie reminded me of, stuff like that, druggy movies.
Guy Ritchie movies.
Yeah, I would have just thought, I probably would have loved it and shown it to all my friends multiple times. But yeah, from this vantage point, it was just too much, like we said. And it's, as a film, it was good to absorb because of its uniqueness and the craft, and clearly a lot of time and love was put into just the crafting of this story and telling it in this way. But I guess even from the poster and stepping into it, I thought it would be more of a Train Spotting, more of sort of a black comedy. It's fun. They're druggies, but we're going to make it like cool, crazy imagery.
Yeah, what if one of them died? But that's still the same.
Yeah, but instead it was this very emotionally wrenching experience.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, so let's get... Ooh, I just knocked the microphone on accident. Let's get into the story itself. I mean, how do you feel... I mean, the story is fucked up. Right? I mean, so this is a spoiler. But I mean, like, literally... Okay, so this dude has huge issues. I mean, he it seems like he's fantasizing about his mom on some level when he's sleeping with Victor's mom, and it like turns him into a baby. He's like sucking on her nipple, and then he's a baby in her arms sucking on her nipple.
Right.
And like that starts over the course of the movie. It's like that blends weirdly in with his sister. You know, you find out later in the movie he has all these jealous reactions to her being with different, like these like bad dudes or whatever. And
and his sister's pretty sexually broken.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And it's like I think the movie starts to blur the line where at the beginning it comes off as like protective brother guy. And like by the end of by like 3/4 of the way through the movie, it starts to feel a little bit like it's definitely maybe it's 70% protective brother guy and 30% sexual attraction.
Right. From like some sort of depraved backwards way.
Yeah.
That he's longing for that depth of intimacy with his sister, and it comes out through sexuality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And he's got, you know, at the end of the movie, I mean, he chooses to go. It's crazy. I mean, he goes into the dude's brain and is basically watching what it would be like to have sex with his sister. And then he goes into, I mean, there's like that weird scene of like inside her vagina. And I'm like, what the fuck? I just like, I've never seen anything like that in a movie before.
Right.
And so he goes into the sperm at the end and ends up becoming her child. And there is like, and when I say that he's fucked up, I don't mean that like it's just that it goes, the story goes in a direction that, like, I think is narratively coherent. Mm-hmm. But I think part of the ending had left me a little bit like, okay, what was the real takeaway from this movie?
Yeah.
Did you feel that way?
Oh, yeah. And, well, and another author might have written the whole thing, but with a different ending. You know, yeah, it goes to so many uncomfortable places. And at a certain point, I really was like, why are you taking me here, even though this is potentially possible and kind of makes sense for the story? It's like, it's also kind of just gross and a bizarre choice. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, it made me, I guess, like, it made me feel like the point of the story was that you have characters who, especially this guy, and his sister, who have been through about as, like, I'm not saying as much as is possible, but about as much as ever naturally occurs, of, like, this is a depth of brokenness that, like, most people don't find themselves in.
Right. Yeah, I would hope so.
And the backdrop, I thought the backdrop of Tokyo was brilliant because Tokyo is, not because I think Tokyo's a worse city somehow, if you could find a way to, like, quantify a city's morals or something. It's not worse than anywhere else. It's not worse than New York or Paris or something, but there was this backdrop of, like the amount of electric lights in the movie created this really interesting space, like, sense of space, that it's like an alienness to it.
Right.
And the only real meaningful connections in this movie are between the guy and his sister, and then his British painter friend, whose name I can't remember either.
Yep.
But, like, it's like they live in almost like on an alien planet, and anyway, all of that just made it feel like that, plus all this, like, visceral stuff that goes way down to the, like, literalness of humanity. Like, this is literally what conception is. This is literally what a car wreck is. This is literally what doing drugs is. This is literally whatever it is. That you get down to this place where I think it creates, weirdly, all of that kind of almost absurd. Like, there's an absurdism that's just, but the problem is, like, absurdism doesn't necessarily imply literalism, but in this case it does.
Right.
That, like, it puts you in a place of, like, okay, like, this is what the world is like. This is just the very bottom of it, kind of. But there's so much in this movie that is true. And that is like, oh, wow, like, I think this dude could be trying to open the viewer's eyes up to, like, this is all the shit that you see in a very different way, in a very, like, simplified and like, sort of over there sort of way.
Yeah.
And this is the stuff that's in you, possibly. This is the stuff that's in, even if these things didn't happen to you, there's stuff that's, like, you're broken. You have stuff, and, like, you live in a world that is animalistic like this. Yeah. Seems to be on some point, on some level, the sort of one of the thrusts maybe of the story. Did you get any of that, or?
Yeah, for sure. Because kind of what we were saying about how he doesn't, the filmmaker doesn't turn your face away from anything. He zooms in super close, literally with the camera, and through the power of CGI into a gunshot wound or a stove burner, and just putting the camera's face and the viewer's face very directly into these moments that we normally don't get that close to in real life,
that we don't want to think about, or we don't want to, like, we want to think about it as a thing that happens sort of in this, like, cloud-shaped thing that passes over the sky of our mind once a month or once a week or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's incredibly uncomfortable for sure. There's a better word than that. On that note, the point where the movie broke apart a bit for me, or at least I became disenchanted with the filmmaker for making the choices he did, was there's a point where the sister gets an abortion, and you see the aborted fetus very up close.
Yeah.
And that felt, I mean, I don't know, this is just an opinion, but like a bridge too far. That felt like taking it to a place of vulgarity that was beyond the point of art to me. Where, yeah, of course, that happens in the world, and it's dark, and we don't want that and don't want to be near it. We don't want other humans to die, most of us, but I don't know, that felt just trashy in a way, or like shock value. And maybe it wasn't, I don't know, his intent, but he sure showed it to us, you know, like all the way. And on that note, sort of back to the sexuality, there's a lot of nudity in this movie, and there's a lot of sex, and none of it, I would say, is arousing. It's all very sad and depraved, and yet the camera doesn't turn away, you know, again.
Right.
And so it's just, they really pound home the
no pun intended.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I didn't mean that. Pounding. I love a lot of pounding in the movies that I watch. They stick your face in it, and it's awful. You just want to sweep in and help these people's lives, you know, and pull them out of the situation that they've gotten themselves in, and they're not going to take themselves out of on their own.
Yeah, man. I think I felt a little bit like the abortion scene was sort of the like piss Christ moment of this movie. Are you familiar with the piss Christ? So it's this piece of art that was made where the artist basically, I don't remember if they did the portrait of Christ on the cross himself, or it was over something else that had been already been made. But basically, he filled up the frame, basically in between the glass, on the inside, in between the glass and the image, with his own urine. Mm-hmm. And it was taken as this like very, very heretical thing.
Sure.
Of course. You know, like, of course.
Like the ultimate blasphemy, or the ultimate
exactly. But I think
disrespect.
I think the Piss Christ was ultimately about the fact that, like, I think the artist's intention, from what I remember, or at least the way that I took it, was like, and I was in college at the time, so who knows how I was taking everything, but was that basically you are always viewing redemption or God or whatever through the lens of your humanity, and through this like really uncomfortable reality that's like, you are who you are, the world is who it is, and through that sort of like I don't know what you would call it, like there's like a kind of refraction there as you're looking at God, and so there's almost no way to separate your view of God from your own humanity. And also like what you would call like the worst parts of your humanity, right? Like, so anyway, the point of that is that I think that scene, and to me, felt a lot like, yeah, I mean, it was brutal, and it was showing something for what it is, and it was, I think, like bringing, in my mind, it was another like kind of like sickening. I mean, this movie has so many sickening things in it that I think are meant to sicken you with the like realities of what humanity is. Yeah. Like not the parts of humanity that we gravitate towards necessarily, or the
Right.
ones that we like maybe every single person watching that movie not like would identify with or something. But it's like when we talk about human nature, we are also talking about this. And we're also
Yeah.
talking about, and I'm not even saying that as like an anti-abortion thing. I'm just saying that it brings you into focus with like a thing that is like a brute fact
Yeah.
of like the human biological process and the ways that we interfere with the human biological process and the ways that we master ourselves and whatever it is, that all of that comes with, there's a brutality, whether it's like drug use or kind of all the other things that show up in this movie. It's like a self-brutality, right? Like that we are capable of and are in certain situations you are either pushed to or choose, right? I mean, because like
Yeah.
there's this movie had a lot of stuff in it that was both chosen and someone was pushed to,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, you find out that Oscar agrees to go to the bar to bring this amount of drugs that's like way more than anybody should be having in their jeans pocket. I guess technically jeans implies that each leg is one gene, right? So I guess technically his jean pocket, but his that he goes out because he's trying to get his friend back because he slept
Right.
with his friend's mom and his friend won't talk to him anymore.
Right.
And then you think it's an accidental thing, and then you find out that his friend set him up.
Right.
And so therein lies the whole story, right? Therein lies the whole, like, that's like the ore of it, is that the really tragic thing in this movie, well, no, there's a lot of tragic things. One additionally tragic thing in this movie is that this dude, outside of all the, like, sex stuff we talked about before, like, this dude loves his sister and, like, wants the best for her. He's never, like, overtly, like, I want to be with you or something weird. He's just, like, he just doesn't want her to be with a bad dude. And he accepts the blame for the fact that he got her to take Molly at that bar and do all these drugs. And he knows that she slept with that dude in the bathroom or whatever at the club that night.
Right.
She doesn't remember what happened. And then it was that guy that she met, that dude on drugs that night, who's the strip club owner, who becomes her, like, boyfriend thing, like, supplier.
Right.
And, like, that dude is, like, she is the dude that he basically he caused the circumstances that caused her to basically circle the drain.
Yeah.
And the juxtaposition of who she was when she showed up with her, like, nice little coat thing and her teddy bear and whatever.
Yes.
And who she is, like, stripping and
Right.
having sex with this, like, awful dude in her, like, dressing room and
Right.
whatever. And she's doing it while the British guy's trying to call that her brother died and whatever. And it's like, he carries that guilt around with him, and he spends so much time trying to alleviate guilt or alleviate pain, whether it's the DMT, his relationship with his sister, his trying to make amends with Victor, there's these different scenarios that he finds himself in where, like, the sad thing is that he's trying to do a restorative, like a weirdly restorative
Right.
thing with his friend, and his friend is taking revenge on him, and that spins this whole fucking thing into motion, right?
Yeah.
Which is so sad.
Right. Right. Yeah. The infuriating part is that, I mean, this director is portraying life as it sometimes is, you know, in the midst of this druggy, transcendental movie, there's a lot of just dark humanity in it. Like, this is the way we act. These are scenarios that happen. And there's a weird element of when he's watching, you know, floating overhead. I mean, basically watching the repercussions and of the other characters and their lives falling apart, or, you know, and he's not able to step in,
Right.
and stop anything. It's just like you have to
That's his
let it play
disembodied
out and
spirit
happen.
is closing the garage door.
Yeah. And yeah, in that way, in that backwards, twisted way, the end is almost sort of redemptive, where he's kind of doing a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I agree. No, I totally agree with you.
There was, this makes me think of someone, well, I don't know the reference. Someone wrote a tweet that ended up going to all the news sites and kind of went semi-viral.
Yeah.
But basically the premise was some random guy, not a notable person, just said, you know how everybody talks about like seeing the light at the end of the tunnel when you die? What if in every person's experience who has ever lived, what if that light at the end of the tunnel is actually the lights of a hotel room and you're being like rebirthed as a new human? Mm-hmm. And it went viral because it blew people's minds. They're like, holy shit, what if that is us? What if we just continually repeat as people?
Right.
And that's kind of horrifying and kind of comforting,
Yeah.
And I feel like this movie, for sure with the reincarnation bit, literally played that out.
Yeah, I mean, it was really nice to live. It was really nice. I totally, man, that's a great point. Because he basically, in his own way, is like able to like manifest a way out for his sister by becoming her child.
Yeah.
And there isn't a threat of like, you did all the drugs and did all this stuff and you're going to hell.
Right.
It's okay, you're assessing things. And like, he could have, I mean, at the end when he's going through the Love Hotel, which is funny because that's like that weird, it's the model. I mean, you see the model of that hotel earlier in the movie and that like weird dude who makes the fluorescent reproduction of Tokyo.
Yeah.
Where like you're never, I mean, when you think back on it, like, there's probably some like horrifying sophomore in college who would write a think piece about how like the whole movie actually happens in the model and he's like on a drug trip.
Right.
Anyway, I don't want to read that piece and I don't want to even give it any more credence than that. But I think like where he's going through this Love Hotel, which is an incredible name for a hotel. It's just amazing. But he's seeing all these people having sex. And there's like that weird like light fire that's always happening like in the girl's groins, right? Where it's essentially you pick up pretty quickly like, okay, those are entrance points for his spirit or something.
Yeah.
And like all of this sex happening, like there's a suspension of disbelief, right? Where, I don't know, my guess is that everybody who's having sex in a Love Hotel, a place called Love Hotel, is probably wearing a condom, but like, or should be. But I just mean like, narratively, it's a segue of like, he has all these opportunities to literally start over anonymously.
Yeah.
And he wipes the slate clean and he just starts over and doesn't know anything kind of thing. Yeah. And we don't know that he knows more or whatever, but well, we kind of do though, because he decides to be his sister's kid. And I think it's meaningful that the last scene of the movie is that you're still have the camera consciousness when he's born and they snip the umbilical cord. Like the consciousness doesn't stop, right? Which I think is the really interesting part, which is the possibly like which I think is like to your point, is the really restorative element in this movie, that like this dude, the idea is that he is essentially carried over at least some portion of his consciousness and the stuff he's learned from this assessment.
Yeah.
And been like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to, and like almost literally like, I'm not going to do any of that again. Here I am.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, like it feels a little bit like that. Did you take it like that, or like?
Sure. I didn't think all of those thoughts, but I'm in agreement. Yeah. Yeah. And that gets into the weird thought of, I mean, this is taking it really far, but it's like, does his consciousness as him then go away as a new baby? Because, as children, we don't retain those memories.
Right.
And then he just becomes basically anonymous anyway. I don't know.
I don't know. And that's why I think like, that's the crazy thing, is that this man, it's I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess it seems like the director wants to add some ambiguity there.
Yeah.
He wants you to think that maybe it does carry over and maybe it doesn't.
Right.
Like, because otherwise I feel like the movie would have ended with him going into the sperm and then breaking into the egg or whatever, right? Like,
sure,
that would have been the end of the movie. Or it would have been like her having a kid and you're like, oh my God, it's the dude, but he doesn't remember.
Right.
But that's not what it is.
They keep it with that perspective.
Yeah, like he keeps it all the way through. And so, I don't know. We'd have to ask Gasper. But it seems to hint at that like, on some level, he's almost like broken the cycle. Because I do think that the pregnancy, it's weird. I mean, I think the, like, not to get too graphic, but
go for it.
So we have two sex scenes with the sister in the movie. The first one is with the weird, awful dude, where she's just sort of like
enduring it,
putting up with it, clearly, and faking it. And then we have this scene at the end, which I think it's important that sex scene happens on a weird back room couch at a like, it's just happened. She's just like, she didn't even, that dude walked up behind her and was like, oh, you were so great or whatever. And she's like, oh God, okay, I'll have sex and I'll, do my act or whatever.
Yeah.
But, and that dude, remember after the abortion, that dude is talking to the girl in a back room of the strip club, a different girl, and is talking about how she said she wanted to have kids with him.
Right.
And then at the end of the movie, she's having sex with her brother's friend, who's had this like thing for her the whole movie. Which, for all his like sort of snark, that dude doesn't come off as like a snarky dude.
No, seems like kind of an okay guy.
Weirdly, he's like, as far as like expat druggy painters go, he seems like a great dude. Like he is at the top of that pyramid.
Yeah,
morally speaking, I think. Like, in
her circles, like, he was the safest guy.
Yeah. Like, he was the knight in shining armor. He was the knight in glistening sheer purple armor. I don't know how he wore that one shirt for like so long. But I mean, they're having sex at the end of the movie, and the sort of like defining sexual moment of the movie, and she's like, it's like, it seems like very like loving sex. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways. Like, there's like, it's the first moment in the movie where like emotion enters into sex on any level, and she is, in the throes of passion, is telling him to come inside of her. And she didn't, the only other sex scene we have with her, she's not even remotely saying that. It happens.
Yeah. She
doesn't seem super stoked. But like, and I thought that was like a meaningful like comparison, because like the fact that he enters into that situation and comes out as the kid is like, it feels like there's a break in the cycle that she finally, or it feels like it's meant to symbolize that in the film. Like, you can't extrapolate too much from that. I mean, who knows? But like, it's not like we see, young Oscar reborn, and it's like the guy's still there, and he's like, I love you, or something, whatever the fuck.
A like certain kind of director would have taken it that far, and just like, here's the nice bow on the end.
Yeah, now you can sleep a tiny bit better tonight. But like, no, but there was something. I felt like there was something. I think what you said about that being redemptive actually seems really true. The more I think about it, I think like if there is a weird. Even at the end of the movie, there's the snipping of the umbilical cord is another like kind of barbaric thing, like that's there in the last moment of the movie, but there's a warmth to it. There's a warmth to the last 2 minutes of the movie or 3 minutes of the movie that didn't exist for most of the rest of the movie, outside of their like brother, sister, like, I'm not going to leave you, and like their life talks and stuff, where it felt like, whoa, these people deeply care about each other.
Yeah. There's probably, I mean, on a second watch, which I won't do, like we said, there's probably even more symbolism that I didn't pick up on. But I mean, just for example, outside the main character's window in Tokyo on this whatever high-rise apartment, there's just this neon sign that says enter.
Right.
And then the club where he gets ultimately killed is called The Void. So, I mean, that's like maybe a really obvious winking one. It's like, hey, you're entering the void. But still, I like that a director makes those specific choices, you know, and just puts in those little Easter eggs.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that I noticed was, so when he's in that first scene, he's getting high. And as he begins to get high, like right before he goes up into the like ganglia forest, the sign below enter the void, or the sign that says enter, the sign, like there's a sign below that condenses down into an eye. Like it looks like an eye with like a fluorescent background, like for like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I think I only noticed it because I had just taken my ADD medicine. But like the thing is like over and over again, these like, I mean, there's a huge thing with tunnels in this movie, where, like you were saying, like it goes down into something,
right?
Which I think is interesting, especially because like that pushes this narrative of him mining his life. Like he's going further down and further down and further down into either his own life or the repercussions sort of thing. But a lot of times that all the times that I can remember, but I don't think I can remember all of them. It's like as he's going down into something, even like the burner on the stove, it's like it's juxtaposed so that like the burner, I think, acts as like a sort of iris to the coils behind it, right? And moments like that where like, or the light bulb in a socket or whatever, like these moments where there's like this eye imagery in this movie that is like really subtle but is persistent as far as I could trace it on one watch, and I'm never watching this movie again.
Right.
But like I wanted to like metaphysically vomit after it. But like there is this, I think it pushes this idea of like self-awareness, right? Where like this self-assessment thing, this idea that you die and you see,
right? Yeah.
Is a really powerful thing. Like that, the possibility that could be true.
Right.
Is, I think, a really powerful thing to think about, even if we die and it's not true and it ends up we're dirt or we go up into the clouds or whatever happens. Like,
yeah,
it is a really powerful theme to this movie of like seeing yourself outside of yourself, like a kind of like generous or kind of instructive disassociation. You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem really that's like it's totally possible to do in like in a way that's as brutally honest as this movie is.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, what do you think? What do you think about that?
I mean, I guess I don't know if like or enjoy is the right word, but I appreciate a movie or a book or anything that can just gives one reason to speculate on, you know, what does happen after we die. I know that's such a universal question and even plays into faith. But I guess it just reminds me of the fact that none of us know what really happens. You know, we can have our faith systems that tell us what supposedly happens, but it's still like nobody's died and come back with a report of what actually happens when our consciousness goes away.
Nobody died and wrote a book, man. Like you know what I mean? Like it's, So how did that, I mean, there's like that's a big driver. It's a big driver in basically all the monotheistic religions, at least. There are, I would say all religions, but that's not true. I don't know how to condense it in a more accurate way.
Sure. The majority, though, have some afterlife premise.
Most religions have an afterlife narrative.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, how did this movie sit with you as, like, you and I are probably not at different, but you and I overlap a lot probably in the way that we think about, like, Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably ways that we don't or something. And,
sure.
But in the sense that, like, this movie really touched on the nerve of, like, we even disassociate a lot. Like, there's almost a drug element to, like, an afterlife narrative.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's like, I need to escape a thing that's happening to me. And so, you know what? It's all going to be much better when I die, so it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. On some level, as long as I do, you know, I would say that, like, elements of Christianity are not very, like, do this stuff and this will happen. Other elements of it are, and, like, we don't need to get into that. But I would imagine that Islam is the same. I would imagine that Judaism is the same. I had a friend for a while. We just haven't seen each other in a while. We didn't, like, have a falling out, but he had been, like, very devoutly Jewish for a while. And so he used to talk to me about all of the sort of afterlife narratives that Judaism has. Yeah. And, like, everybody has it, and it is like a bit of it's kind of like a safety net. Sure. against like unsolvable anxiety or pain. Yes. Of just like, okay, well, eventually it doesn't matter. It's a nihilism of some kind. I mean, like, a lot of religion engenders a practical nihilism of, like, none of this stuff matters, but there's this other thing that does. That's the only difference, right? Like, between, like, real nihilism and, like, practical afterlife hinging nihilism,
right?
Sort of thing. And so, I mean, like, how did this movie affect the way that you thought about death? Like, or did it? Did it affect? I'm not saying it should have. I just mean, like, did it affect that?
I mean, it did. And again, specifically in this point of life for me, I'm kind of more open than ever to other possibilities than the sort of evangelical idea of heaven that I've always had growing up, where, I don't know, it's not like I walk away from a movie like this completely reorienting my thinking, but the possibility is at least some percentage there that it's like, yeah, maybe that is it. Maybe reincarnation is the thing. Maybe, and for me at least, and I might be a total weirdo, to me that doesn't negate the idea of God either. In some convoluted way, I think they can coexist, but I think it mainly makes me think about, I don't care for people who definitively say, because of their belief system, that they have an answer for what happens after death.
Right.
Because nobody does. Nobody truly does. And you can hold to faith in one thing, and that is technically fine. But, man, none of us know except those of us who are past. So, and we're all going to find out, which is maybe terrifying and maybe comforting. I mean, it's like there's nothing you can do except just at some point accept it.
Yeah, and I think there's no, it's like, man, this movie, I thought, I don't know if it even meant to do this, but at least me subjectively and contextually watching it, it was like, man, it's like you read all these, I mean, you and I have, you growing up evangelical, you have to endure a large number of these, like, this guy was dead for 4 minutes on the operating table, and he was throwing a football with his dad in in front of a mansion, and then like this guy was dead for 30 minutes in an ambulance, and he was walking through a huge triangle towards heaven or something. It's just like where it's like the thing that I thought was so powerful about the blending of drug experience with literal death.
Yeah.
Is that like, it's not weird to me at all that people could have a near-death experience and have it just be like I don't know, on some level, it's like their brain starts playing a movie. I mean, they're still technically alive on some level. It's like that guy that got stuck under the ice for 3 hours or something. And it's like his body got so cold that he survived, and he was living off of, 1% oxygen for a long time or something.
Yeah.
But I just mean, like, there are so many weird cases like this that we try to say, not only is there something else, which is already a huge thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, okay, well, that's crazy, because what would it be? And how would we ever explore it, kind of thing, without just dying?
Yeah.
But then it's like, no, it is literally this thing. This is what happens. What happens is I die and I go throw a football with my dad. Or what happens is, it doesn't matter what it is. Like or like Dante's Inferno. Like, what happens is like, there's basically this like fucked up lawyer who picks your worst weakness and puts you in a place that exposes that weakness even more forever.
Yeah.
Like in some symbolic way, which obviously Dante's Inferno was mostly a political text probably, but I just mean like, or like a lot of the people he hated were in it. So,
yes,
I mean,
that's true.
Like, I'm not saying it was a political text, but I just mean it a little bit was, and also was a kind of like it was also a religious text on some level. But I just mean, like, it is, you're right. I mean, this movie made me feel so weird about, like, just, I don't know, like the blend, like just how sure we are or try to be or can try to be about this stuff that we, like, don't have a way of actually, like, backing up.
Right.
And I don't even mean that cynically. I just mean, like, the idea of, this is a thing I know is true about death and the afterlife and what you have to do to get to the good part of the afterlife.
Yeah. Is,
like, this movie was kind of humbling in a lot of ways,
Right.
Just like, dude, there's nothing crazier that happened in this movie, afterlife-wise, than any other afterlife narrative I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Or have ever believed.
Right.
Like, it's no weirder that your spirit goes out of your body and reviews your life and then watches the fallout than saying that you die and show up at a cloudy Golden Gate and somebody checks you in. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
They look for your name on the reservation list. Like, I don't know. Like, there's no difference. In fact, the hovering spirit thing could even possibly be a tiny bit more believable.
Right.
That your consciousness stays contextual or something in some weird way that even is there's a little bit more of a stepping stone there than, like, you're just in a different place and you're happy all the time.
Yes.
Right. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Back to that comment or the line in the movie just about the DMT being the chemical that our brain produces when we die. That little nugget was strangely beautiful to me because it made me think, what if, I mean, I don't know, God forbid you're like shot in the head or something, you die immediately.
Right.
But what if your consciousness is still there and your brain delivers this sort of beautiful experience that just carries you into the next one, you know?
Totally.
Like, it's not a full cut off of just blackness or full cut off and you're suddenly before the throne of God, like, and have the list of rights read to you or something.
You're having to like answer for a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that, which even on a biological level, that we know that our brain does this, I don't know, that's kind of comforting, because it almost, it just almost seems like a segue to whatever is next, and it's pre-built into our bodies, whatever it may be, which just, that for me makes any death experience, however terrible, maybe kind of immediately sweet.
Well, it's like a failsafe.
Yeah.
Almost. It's like a biological failsafe that's like, all right, don't worry, I'm going to contextualize this to sort of, or I'm going to smooth it over for myself.
Right.
A little bit.
Right.
Right. Yeah, man, that's a good point. I mean, and I thought this movie dealt with the complexity of that really well. That's a hard thing to translate. And to your point, because I felt the exact same way of the, like, and I said this earlier, or I agreed with it earlier, but like this is going to be a shock jock, dark comedy thing that's like snappy and witty and like...
Yeah. Like tripping on drugs is fun. It's cool.
Everybody has a one-liner all the time.
Yeah.
You know, like...
Yeah.
It's basically Snatch about the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt that this movie was unbelievably human. And I felt like I teared up many times during this movie. More times than I don't cry a lot. I tear up, but I don't full on like cry a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But so I got to the point that I can get to without something really bad happening or something. Yeah. Or good. I mean, I've cried at good things too.
Yeah.
Whatever, man, I'm complex. All I meant is that like this movie was deeply affecting even on just the literal personal narrative of a human life.
Yes.
And I think all this meta context existed really nicely in this movie. I think it was like pretty brilliant in the way that it baked that into it. But if this was, if all of the little hinty things happened and it wasn't the spirit went out of the body. It was just like, okay, this guy died. Let me tell you about this guy.
Yeah.
And let me tell you about his sister. Let me tell you about his like weird painter friend. And like, even on that level, this movie is incredible. Yeah. I mean, the way that it engenders compassion in you in the midst of brutality, like a brutal world, it engenders compassion in you just by awareness. You know, like it just opens your eyes to what has happened to, and the like tragic missteps.
Mm-hmm.
That all of us have those things.
Yes.
They didn't end us up in, you know, it didn't end us up in a strip club in Tokyo, but it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It's like all of us have those tragic things that are like, and it was so weirdly, this movie had so much compassion. I felt like for the characters in it, the main characters in it.
Yeah.
Did you, I mean,
sure. Experiencing it in the moment, that didn't occur to me, but thinking back, yeah, it definitely does. Which is, I mean, that in and of itself is probably the sign of a well-made film if it makes you think beyond the end credits, you know. If you're still thinking about it days later and pondering what it presented, then yeah, that tells at least that it was a compelling narrative.
Yeah, it's funny. I was telling my friend Laura about this movie, and she had seen it, and she compared it to two art. She basically said the director of Melancholia. Did you ever see that?
Lars von Trier. Yeah.
So she said Lars von Trier and Gaspar, I don't know how to say his last name.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say his last name. I'm not going to try it. I'm so bad, and it's so common for English-speaking people to get last names wrong. So I just don't even want to bother. But so that basically, Gaspar and Lars von Trier were sort of the Salvador Dali and someone else of modern film, in that like they were the ones who were capturing like the deep hunger of modern man. And like the permanent hunger of modern man, and the permanent condition, like the reality of modern man, better than anybody else. And they were doing it in these ways that were sort of, you know, I mean, there's a lot of like sort of surrealist stuff about this film, but the surrealism always funnels back into a literal truth, which I think like a lot of maybe surrealism is the wrong word. I'm a little bit out of my depth as far as how to describe that kind of thing. Sure. But like, whatever that is, that like the metaphor always bleeds back into a literal thing rather than like the metaphor itself as art.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. I feel like this is such an important movie that I wish everyone could watch it one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think it shakes you a lot wherever you are, and I think it probably is meant to kind of wake you up a little bit, at least, if not a lot, but not so much to the blight of Tokyo residents.
Yeah.
But to the condition of hunger that humanity has been dealing with for the entirety of its existence. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. Like you were saying, I mean, like on some level, it's like religion is like the after death stuff and the religious stuff is stuff that I don't think it's just true that it's a safety net. I don't think it's just whistling in the dark. Although there's an element of it that's true. And then there's another element that's like, I don't know, there's some stuff that makes me think this isn't it, you know, like, or this isn't, my understanding of reality isn't all that reality is. But I think he does dial down, he zooms in via religion, which I think is kind of brilliant. He zooms in on like, almost the context doesn't matter. This is still true about these people. And then also this context adds a shit ton of narrative, like, help.
Right.
You know?
Right. Okay, hard cut to 20 minutes later. The fire is now lit. Tyler re-upped our supply on cigarettes and beer.
I'm the patron saint. I'm the patron saint of those two things, man.
And I don't remember what question he asked me prior to this, but so Enter the Void reminded me of a few different directors and films. Trainspotting I mentioned, but there was also a little bit of Terrence Malick. I don't know if you know his films, like The Tree of Life. Very symbolic, lots of weird abstract montages of just colors and sound, and even a little bit Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. The sort of the trippy space section where he goes through all the colors. Like, color was very important to this movie.
Yeah.
And it was interesting what you said about it being shot in Tokyo, because it seemed like that was a very intentional choice. Just lots of light, vibrant color. If it was shot in some gray England neighborhood or Brooklyn, New York or something, it just wouldn't have had that added element of all these colors and stimulants.
Yeah,
to the
like
eye.
you can't. You can't get your bearings in it, right?
Yes.
I mean, like,
totally.
There's no. I don't know if this was intentional. I imagine everything that goes into this stuff is intentional. I sort of start there, but I don't know that my interpretation of it is always right at all. But it did feel like a lot of Western audiences don't know the layout of Tokyo. I don't.
Right. And it's a huge freaking city. So
I mean,
you can kind of get lost in it just on your own.
Yeah. And there was like, in that sense, there was sort of this like placelessness to it. I read this, oh man, what is the name of the book? So I think, I read this novel about a British expat lawyer who basically ran away from London with some of his firm's money and was just disowned by everybody that he knew or whatever. But he lived in Hong Kong. It was set in Hong Kong.
This was a novel or a nonfiction?
This is a novel.
Okay.
And it's about Baccarat, and he becomes like a Baccarat player. And anyway, it gets into like kind of this concept of hungry ghosts, and it's very different. But it reminded me of that in that it was basically, I think it was interesting to me that these were these were Americans, but like and British. But so it was like these Western characters set in a country that even the viewers don't have not that none do, but like most viewers probably don't have a massive reference point where like even if it were set in London, for instance, it would, there would be at some point, on the skyline you could see like Big Ben or the Ferris wheel and get your bearings.
Yes.
If you on some level. But there was and I would imagine if you've been to Tokyo, maybe there's probably stuff in this movie. There's probably another layer of this movie.
Sure.
If
Points
you
of reference.
understand Tokyo.
Yep.
That I can't tap into. But man, that fire is killing it. But
it's cooking.
I felt it. I don't have like a good vocabulary around directors, so I think I tend to triangulate between directors that I know, which isn't all that like accurate probably. But not probably. But yeah, man, I mean, I feel like I was like in a totally, I just watched Youth by Paolo Sorrentino. And the thing about the only parallel between the two is the juxtaposition, right? Like there's like this ongoing, very visceral juxtaposition between even, I think in this movie it was like the sister as this like life companion to her brother who was like this stabilizing family force of like her in the kitchen being like, well, we're family now, just the two of us, and she's making him dinner and he's not responsive and stuff, right, or whatever.
Yeah.
You have that version of her, and that's juxtaposed with the stripper version of her, that's juxtaposed with the abortion version of her, that's juxtaposed with the like, the kid in the car screaming and screaming and screaming and screaming. Like, in that sense, I think like Paolo Sorrentino does that much more visually. But there was that, maybe all great directors understand juxtaposition, but I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know enough to say that that's true, but yeah, he captured that within sort of the confines of his own style and worldview. He captured like that element really well, I felt like.
Yeah.
And Tokyo acted as a really great backdrop because it's sort of this unknown, I don't know, like diorama, those things we made in school, right? I mean, with the like, I think that's what they're called.
Yeah.
With like the shoebox and the...
Right.
It felt a little bit like that, but except that it would be like doing a diorama with I don't know, like a tiger in, Indiana plains, like some place that's out of its element.
Right.
And that I think added a lot to the like, that backdrop added a lot to the trauma stuff of feeling out of your element and then being out of your element. It was like an interesting like 1-2 punch,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It adds to the disorientation of the character and the viewer, unless you happen to be super familiar with Tokyo.
Well, and I don't even think, I may be wrong about this, but I don't even think that Oscar or his sister ever spoke Japanese in the movie.
Right. Yeah, they did not. There's a good balance of, well, I don't know, just in general in storytelling, when you're introducing elements that are as abstract as this, there has to also be something to tie it back to humanity, kind of like we were saying earlier. And there are some artists or filmmakers who go full abstract, which Terrence Malick is that sometimes, or David Lynch, or Oh gosh, the guy.
Because like a director that like David Lynch puts you in a place that you don't understand and you never understand. Like he doesn't do a lot of bridge building. I think with the viewer, you just immerse in it.
Yeah, there's no connection to reality in some cases.
In some, I haven't watched all of his movies or something, but like the stuff that I've seen from him, it's like I never get the impression. David Lynch is much more like, in my opinion, my uneducated opinion, is much more of a like a dense indie artist. Not dense mentally, but dense in that it's like building an environment musically where they literally do not want you to understand. Mm-hmm. And there's something about being stuck in a place like that where you start to understand things in your own way, kind of. Like Bon Iver is that way. Like Justin Vernon clearly does not write his lyrics in order for you to understand them or to be led into them. They're cryptic all the way through, right? And so Lynch is a little more like that, where like Gasper on this was wanting you to step into something, it felt like.
Yeah.
Like there were lily pads across the pond on some level, even though they were difficult to jump from one to the other, they were still there.
Right. And in the purely abstract stuff, then it gets into mental associations to where the viewer or the reader or the listener brings their own interpretation to it, which, I don't know, at this point in life, I'm not super interested in that sort of thing. I feel like that was helpful in age 18 or early 20s when those sort of pure creative juice is just plowing you down in some piece of art, and you take weird little things from it that you don't even realize that you take. But now I'm more interested in connecting with a character of some kind and perhaps learning something about life or about humanity.
Well, that's a really interesting point. Where did you find yourself injecting yourself into this movie?
Mostly in wishing the characters would make better decisions for themselves, because from a disconnected perspective, you can be like, dude, that's
not a great idea.
That's going to fuck you up worse. You know, that's going to take you down the spiral further.
Right.
And sort of that, like I've always, well, not always, I have this weird concept about how I think we like watching other people self-destruct in a fictional setting. Like that's why Breaking Bad was so popular, maybe part of the reason on subconscious level of Walter White is trying to do a good thing, but he's doing something societally horrible, and none of us want to take our lives in that place, but it's entertaining to watch someone else do it. And I think that's really interesting. It's almost like getting to misbehave while not dealing with the repercussions ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's gladiatorialism.
Sure.
Right? I mean, it's we want others to suffer or go through a logical extension of ourselves without us having to do it.
Yes.
I don't think that everybody watching Gladiators wanted to be a gladiator, but my point is like I think the metaphor is flexible enough in that because the Walter White stuff, I found myself at times in this movie being like the hungry-eyed watcher of like I was cataloging something. And I felt really bad about that by the end of the movie. But I think it revealed something in me that's probably been revealed many, many, many times. That's like, it speaks to what you were saying, that there is something where I feel like I am digesting someone else's life, which is weirdly cannibalistic, but you're digesting their life in order to wring meaning out of your own.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah. Absolutely.
I was very guilty of that watching this movie.
Right. Well, and I think that's why, I mean, others have said better than I will say now, but just storytelling is so built into the human experience that we need to resonate with other people doing things that we will never do or that we have yet to do.
Right.
In order to learn about ourselves. I know that sounds so froofy or falsely deep or something, but even just hundreds or thousands of years ago, people sitting around a fire telling stories, you know, these legends, some of which have endured until today. You know, why, just the simple fact, why do we as humans like stories so much?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the simplest answer is because they can teach us something. I mean, perhaps sometimes they're purely entertaining, but there's something so viscerally human about telling something that is made up and presenting a possible reality to others.
Yeah.
Now I'm losing my own trajectory here, but I mean, it makes sense as an avid reader and as a lover of film and as a writer myself. It's just I resonate with stories so much because there's so many different kinds, and I think nearly all of them are valuable in their own way.
Yeah, I mean, we live in sort of a post-Camus, post-Sartre, or however you say that, world in which, like, existentialism or absurdism is woven into the fabric of how we see the world, right? And I think, like, a lot of that stuff was basically there is a purity and contextual significance to the lack of significance, right? Sort of like the juice is worth the squeeze, metaphysically, like,
right.
And I think it's the Sisyphus myth, though. I mean, it goes way further back than that, but it was a retelling basically of the Sisyphus myth, at least in Camus' case, but can you flesh that out real
quick?
So Sisyphus is doomed by the gods, I don't remember why, to push a rock up a hill every day, and then at the end of every day, basically at the end of every day, the rock rolls back down the hill and he has to push it back up the hill again. And I think, like, Camus sort of recontextualized that there was a beauty to the repetitive futility of humanity, right? Like our holiness, self-assigned holiness, was our struggle, right? And it gave, I think actually in a really beautiful way, it gave the mundane grind of our life a shelf where there wasn't all this aspirationalism necessarily that you needed to have of, like, I'll be happy when.
Yes.
It was like, you should be happy right now, because the pain and the joy that comes, all of those things are momentary. Like, being human is momentary. And so the idea of, have you read The Stranger?
Yes. That's the only thing by Camus that I have read.
So it's like, in The Stranger, you've got a dude who falls in love with a girl, kind of. He's not sure. And she's in love with him, or he's not really in love with her. She's in love with him, but he likes her a lot. I think he's, like, kind of subconsciously in love with her. And then he sort of murders somebody on the beach because he's hot. Because it's hot out and the sun's reflecting off of their glasses or something. And, you know, he's in prison at the end, and he's longing for the girl, and he'll never have her, right? Like, he'll never get out of jail, I think, is, like, kind of the end of the story.
Right.
And I think that the thing is that is a really beautiful portrayal of, it's a portrayal that on the Venn diagram overlaps this movie with a strange amount of compatibility. Like, there's a large percentage of it in the middle, right? Where, like, it's the hunger. It's the fact that, like, this dude is basically from the afterlife sort of I think in his only act of will for the last hour and a half of the movie is like becoming the baby that his sister has. But I think there's something similar where it's like he is injecting himself back in, literally and figuratively, I guess, back into the human experience as like, this is the real beauty here, right? On some level. You could take this film in a existential or absurdist way that like continuing the cycle is the beauty of humanity. And the finiteness of our experiences, the finiteness of our love, the finiteness of our pain, the finiteness of our struggle, the finiteness of all those things as the sort of the counterweight to this infinite thing we feel.
Yeah.
And that we chase forever, that infinite weird hunger that we all have and run with and chase no matter what. And it's ecclesiastical, like you get to the end of, I don't know, you get to the end of somebody who did only the very religious thing, and you get to the end of their life, and then you get to the end of the life of the person who did the opposite, like the Hemingways of the world, who just were these brazen, sort of like loud.
Yeah, they live big.
They just lived big, these living big people. And all of them come to the end of their life with a mixture of regret and satisfaction.
Right.
And that is humanity. And I think like this film was like, this is humanity in a context that's so unrelatable that you have to the core of that idea comes to the surface over 2 hours and 23 minutes. That on some level we are all this person. It's just the drugs we take are different. Like the life decisions aren't as brash or harsh at times. But like on some level, the truth is that I think that like on some level we all die of a gunshot wound in a weird foreign bathroom. Like you're just fucking alone. Like that was the meaningful thing to me of that death scene, was like that dude is utterly alone.
Sure.
And anyone who dies is. Like, even if you're dying there and all of your friends and family are there and you're mentally coherent to accept that, like that context, I think is actually, that context is so storybookish and corny and so way less than 1% of the human experience that it doesn't even matter. But that's still a thing you aspire to. It's like, have a great family and have all these things, and then when you die you'll have people around, is basically the thing. I'm not saying that family and being married are bad. I'm just saying that like there is this weird arc in our minds that are like, okay, I'm investing to be less alone later.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Wow. There's a lot there. Yes. Well, and so here's a weird thought. Not a weird thought, an interesting one. As a writer, and I don't mean that in a pretentious way, speaking about myself, I just mean...
Dude, but you are a real writer. I mean, dude, you've put out a lot of books, man. You've published books.
Well...
A lot of people like me run around being like, I'm a writer, and we've never published a book, so... I technically have published a book.
That's not the thing that quantifies it, though.
No, but I just mean I mean in the sense that I think you live out your writerhood in a really genuine way. I've put out one book that was a collection of essays from myself and a lot of other people, with Andrew and I put it out together. Vinyl Me, please. But I mean, like, I don't know. I think there's something I really admire the like brazenness of your publishing. I haven't read one of your books yet. It literally is on my list, and that's not a thing to like calm down the fact that I haven't read one of your books, but I'm just saying that, like, I don't know, when I talk to people about my writer friends, I always mention you, because it's like, yeah, you're doing it. Like, you're actually publishing stuff and putting things together and putting it out, and that's like that in its own small sort of existential way is an act of bravery, and a meaningful act as far as we could assign anything meaning.
Yeah.
It might not be as meaningful as like taking a bullet, falling on a grenade for somebody, but it might be. I mean,
Sure.
I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. And where I was going was just trying to symbolize or articulate the human experience in a fictional story is a strange challenge, because I have read those books, where novels or whatever it may be, where the symbolism was just laid on way too thick, and it took me out of the writing itself. It took me out of the character or whatever. And I don't know, the guys who can do it well, the people who can do it well, are either way smarter than me, or they had just as many insecurities about it. Because when approaching a story, there is that weird tension of wanting to, I mean, I guess get a message across, get some core value or idea across through characters, and yet let your characters speak for themselves and not inject you, the author, into their voice too much, because that is when writing breaks. That is when it seems corny or overdone. And so, yeah, the books that I've come away from reading, I mean, that have hit me hard symbolically, or meant something deep and endearing, like some truth that I've taken away from it. Most of the time, I think that's probably unintentional.
Yeah.
And basically, I'm just saying, I can't, from my experience, I can't set out to write something with a defined purpose or message in mind. I have to just write what occurs to me and hope that will mean something to someone else. Because otherwise, I think you just get too caught up in the metaphor.
Right.
And you will, and I have done this. I've overdone it, So there's this weird subtlety that comes in where I tend to think writers or creative people in general are more observant of the life around them, and they're trying to communicate what they see and hear and feel through character, and just get this sort of demon or whatever strange entity is in them. They're trying to get it out and just communicate it and say, hey, I think these fucked up thoughts, or I have these weird fears about being alive. And in some way saying, do any of you also resonate with this?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think like, if we were to take authors, for example, I mean, if you went through your top 10 author list, my guess is that all 10 are very different from each other. And all 10 of them, if they talked about why they wrote or how they wrote, it would all be totally different. And I think
so true.
I think the idea that it's this I don't remember which Greek philosopher said this. The easy guess is always Socrates or Plato, but it probably was one of them. But I've been out of touch with that world for a long time now. But there's this translated quote that neither of those people probably ever said. Or if they did, they said it one time and it got burned into someone's brain who wrote their stuff down.
Right.
Whatever. The point is, the quote is, a beard does not a philosopher make, right? Which, of course, that's like very 18th century translation, but like the beard doesn't make the philosopher, right? And it's why, like, the idea, I think the tension for a lot of creatives is like, a lot of creative things begin by imitation. Like, you want to be like someone. And so you write in their style, or you
Yes.
make movies in their style, or whatever, because you want to be like them. And it's that David Foster Wallace quote that, like, in the end, of course, or in the end, you become in the end, of course, you become yourself. Like, that it's just an outworking of, like, we are just in our own so finite subjective ways going through a process of becoming ourselves. And the crazy thing is that exists in a context in which you die because of a stupid police raid in a Tokyo bathroom.
Right.
Or you die because you get broadsided by a truck going to the grocery store because you were texting and driving. I mean, who knows? It ends. Like, there's the story, even if you make it to the end of your life and you give a great speech and then you lay down and die. Like, I'm sure, I would imagine in the human experience, given how many people have been alive, that has happened before. But it's this thing that we all think is like a true thing. Like, this is my life, there's going to be a bow tied on it.
Yeah.
And it's just not true. It just isn't true. There's nothing to support that. But we still believe it so deeply that we live in terms of this, like, deeper thread to our life that will eventually see daylight. And I think art is trying to force that to the surface, you know, like, just, I mean, if you think, I don't know Faulkner's process for writing, but what I know is that Faulkner captured the South,
right,
and for what it was. Like, Absalom is, first of all, one of the most brilliant titles in white literature ever. And that book is one of the most brilliant books in white literature ever. The layers of that go down, of literally David in the Old Testament crying that out.
Yeah.
And the possibility of Faulkner playing David and in the South being Absalom, like white entitled South shit being Absalom. And then there's, like, the family context that occurs in that story. I mean, there's just so many things as you drill down into that book that are so good. But it's also, you know, Faulkner had 1.5-page long sentences, and who knows how he wrote or why he wrote. And it's like, everybody has different stuff, and learning. It's my frustration a lot, especially in the business world. It's like, or just because the only reason I say that, I'm not a great business dude in a lot of ways, but it's like you have all these things about, like, here are the best productivity things. Here's what Jack Dorsey's iPhone home screen looks like. Literally, that was a thing I read. Yeah. I mean, that was a real thing.
Right.
And it's just, the principle just applies. It's like, you just get your jersey dirty and you learn, or you don't.
Yeah.
And, like, at the end of it, you have a story to tell that probably is what was true about you. Like, the pervasiveness of moleskin notebooks and my younger self's tendency to buy them is unbelievable. The idea that I'm going to write the right thing in a fucking $20 notebook, but not on a notepad. Like, I do almost all my writing on my phone, almost, except for long form stuff. But it's like, I write everything on my phone because that's the only way I can get it right there. And it's like just comfortable for me to write on my phone. And so when I put my poetry book out later this year, whenever that happens, it's like, all that shit will be stuff that was written on a phone.
Yeah.
And on, like, a bus, or at work, in the bathroom, or walking to lunch, or in the backyard drinking wine and smoking cigarettes by myself. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and very normal, mundane, human moments. And
that's the thing, is mundane stuff is human. That is your life. How Annie Dillard is so right about that. How you spend your hours is, of course, how you spend your life.
Right.
Like, that's it. There's no fiery chariot swooping down from the sky to force you into great art.
Right.
And like this film has to have taken unbelievable amounts of time to make.
Right.
And thought and care, like you said, like lovingly made. That was a really good way to put that. And I don't give a shit how this dude made this movie.
Yeah.
Because the mechanics aren't going to make someone else better at making a movie like this. They'll learn it if they want to know it. But there was like this sort of je ne sais quoi thing that it was like, I got to tell this thing. I have this idea. I got to tell it. I think it should be in this way. I'm going to make it this way. And here's how and then, okay, there's a team of 20 people or 100 people who are like, I can add my skill in to do this thing and whatever.
Right.
And there's no, like, you can't replicate. I don't think you can replicate that to a degree that is meaningful. Right. Necessarily, but trying to replicate it is also meaningful, and that therein lies the great tension of humanity. That mimicking is a form of self-discovery, and you can make great art while you're mimicking.
Yeah.
But you're still doing something else that's not mimicking, right? Like you're still sitting in front of the thing for 100 hours or whatever, right? Like, right. Anyway.
Yeah. You're hitting a lot of buttons for me in a good way. I mean, or just I resonate with what you're saying, and you know, I like to think about to Faulkner, you know, just in a general sense, presumably Faulkner had those nights where maybe he had drank a bunch and maybe he thought he was the greatest writer that had ever lived, right. And yet no one had discovered his genius. Or maybe he had nights in the middle of Absalom or another novel where he was just like, dude, this is bullshit. I should stop writing right now. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. It's just like we're talking about him now. He's dead. He doesn't give a shit one way or the other.
Fucking idea.
Yeah, and I don't know. That's fascinating to me because I don't think people will be talking about Josh Gaines and his great books one day. But even if they were, does it matter to me now? Does it matter when I'm dead? No, it doesn't. And so then, I mean, not to get so bleak, because that actually isn't bleak to me, but it's just like, whether that's true or not, how do I just exist right now? Mm-hmm. How do I tell the stories that make sense to me now? And how do I find meaning in that here and now? And like the film, surely a ton of time went into it. Like you said, the guy, you know, there was a time when Enter the Void was just a script on someone's laptop or on someone's notebook, and they didn't know if it was going to come to life. It's just, it's weird unraveling backwards the progress of any given story, and just how it was something insignificant and then became supposedly significant because they made it happen. I don't know. I'm getting really abstract now, but
no, that's not abstract.
I think about these things even when trying to tell stories myself, because on some level, at the basest level, I want to matter. I want to know personally that I matter, and I want to matter to other humans who are currently alive. But even if you take that to the furthest extent, it basically all breaks down to nothing.
Well, no, but I think, but the problem is that I don't think you're well, ultimately, sure, we don't know. It goes back to like, I don't know what happens when we die. I don't know if everything that happens on Earth as we're alive in now just stays here or it matters. It probably stays here, but who fucking knows? I don't know. And the reason I say that is just that, like, the thing that you can't deny about yourself is that you have a drive to do something.
Yes. Like which does not exist in all people. I mean, at least in this form.
in
Right.
like this idea of like quiet desperation, right? Like people living out their lives in quiet desperation. It's possible that that is an explanatory thing about all humanity, and that is true. I mean, it is explanatory no matter what. It's possible that that explanatory thing is true. It's also possible that that is a clever line in a book.
Yeah.
That
That a lot of people happen to resonate with.
yeah, where they're like, that's what I mean. So in that sense, like time adds value into that sentence.
Right.
That I think at the time was an educated guess. I mean, think about, let's say that you're Van Gogh, who died fucking broke, or Mozart. We don't even have a grave for Mozart. They poured lime on his body, an unmarked grave. I mean, it's like, the problem is I think that a lot of people want to be creative. It's not a problem. Everybody wants to be creative in a recognized way. Mozart did.
Yeah.
Van Gogh did. Everybody did.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has. The fact that almost everyone doesn't get it, I think, plays into like a really important adjustment of our worldview,
Yes.
which is that I think it's important to chase your creative. I don't think it's wrong to want to create things that people resonate with in a visible way.
No, not at all.
I don't think that's bad at all. It's just true. It's human. It's just, sure, you could drill down and be like, all humans are bad, so that's bad. But fine, if you want to live that way, that's okay. But I think that the idea of just expression for the sake of itself is, for some reason, collectively agreed upon as important. I mean, that's all you could really say, right? I mean, it's like you couldn't get to a point where it's like, I mean, you could say that about modern artists. Like, does Michael Jackson give a shit right now that people, I mean, he was at the height of recognition and then at the depths of it and whatever. And I don't know, like you don't, we act like there is a review board that you die. I think honestly, like human applause in whatever form it happens, whether literal or figurative, is, I think, in the back of our minds, like an indication of something that we think will happen that probably doesn't ever happen.
Right.
Like, I think that we, especially people who grew up evangelical, think that there's this like party thrown for every person entering the gates of heaven. Where they're like, you made an amazing podcast and an amazing documentary, and you wrote a great essay on, you know, Paolo Sorrentino's film Youth, and you met this person and you had an Instagram picture with them and whatever. And it's like, we just want our shit on a billboard all the time.
Yeah.
And the idea of like, on that level, we're just, maybe we're all narcissists on some level, but it's just a true thing. Everybody does that. And I mean, like, just look at like modern American Christianity's, maybe at this point a little, I don't know if it's dwindling or not, but like the I'm on a mission trip pictures.
Right.
I went to Uganda and here's my 5-page Facebook post about what God taught me in Uganda.
Right. And how I was
in
saving
7 days.
souls.
In 7 days. And you're like, okay, this doesn't match up with even being remotely possibly true with like anything that I understand about the human experience with anything.
Mm-hmm.
Not that people can't have momentary things that shift their life, but the idea that there could literally be a marketplace in which you go over and shift people's lives is not even possible. Right? Yeah. But we want it to be true. And the reward is people being like, oh my God, that's so incredible. And I think this film strips away a lot of that bullshit, right? Like the fact that there's not a redemptive, there is a possible redemptive end to the movie, but there's no redemptive meat to this movie, I think is actually really interesting, because all of human experience, especially in social media, but it has just exacerbated it. But all of human experience is viewed through another person's view of it. It's a filter. It's like it's just the fact that all history is just a curation from nerds.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying nerds are bad. I'm just saying that, like,
no, just the people who.
Dude, there's like 10 people, or like, okay, there's 1,000 people. Let's say 10,000. Still, it doesn't even remotely match up to the number of people who have lived. Can you imagine a written account of the Battle of Salamis? We have one, and it's like the Greeks were good and they won. Mm-hmm. Who the fuck? They don't give a shit about the, I don't remember even at this point, tens of thousands of Persians that died or whatever. Mm-hmm. But all those people were people. Nobody ever wrote a fucking history for them that the Western world cares about. I just mean, like, we don't know a lot. It's like it's a curation, and so in that sense, like, that search for meaning is the meaninglessness of our search for meaning is somehow kind of rapturously important.
Right.
For us, right? For you to continue to write books, because who cares? Because it makes you happy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's heavy. It's a weird reality to butt up against. And social media adds a weird element to it. Not to harp on that for too long, but
no,
just
do it, dude.
Because we've all known, and I've been guilty of this myself, just the people who are today chasing that so hard to where their only their sort of tunnel vision mindset is to be as relevant as possible right now and build the biggest following and grow their notoriety and whatever else. But even if you take that to the extreme of let's just hypothetically say all the 7 billion people on Earth are following you. Like, literally every person alive likes what you do and they're paying attention to you and they buy it and they give you their praise and respect and their money. That still would not be enough. It's a weird thought. It's like, what the fuck are we chasing? Like, what number is ever large enough to be enough humans to where we're like, okay, now I feel fine. Now I feel good and content in life that this many people are paying attention to me. This many people respect what I do. This validates my art to the point that I need to keep making it.
Well, I think, yeah, but I totally. And I think though that, so I think the primary thing, and I hate the term creatives. It's like the most annoying thing to me ever. But I can't, I don't want to get into the etymology of a better way to capture that idea. But I think that people who feel driven to make, I think everybody has, it's the same thing. I think everybody has art in them, in the sense of, like,
yes,
aspirational creation. And I don't mean
For
economically aspirational, but just like the feeling of the need to make something.
Yeah.
I think that probably exists in everybody.
Or to contribute in some way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that I took this horrendous, well, the class wasn't horrendous, but the sort of, like, thesis of the class was, which is like, a philosophy of art class is just awful.
Yeah.
Like, all the way down. But I think that, you have, you have to, I think the great artists, if we took our top 10 artists across any medium,
mm-hmm.
they were all tremendously sensitive.
Yes.
To their surroundings and their world, and they just cataloged shit. And they used the stuff that they were cataloging. Think about, I already mentioned Mozart, but it's like, Mozart, there's not really a huge, there's not a massive difference between Mozart and Aphex Twin. Aphex Twin has been eviscerating house music while keeping the structure there his whole career. Mozart was eviscerating church music.
Yeah.
He was pissing off cardinals and whoever the fuck was church people. By the way that he did that was he would make certain sections of masses, 8 measures long when they're supposed to be 6 traditionally.
Mm-hmm.
And it would make the church people, the church fathers, furious.
Right.
I mean, he loved that shit, right? Like he was just fucking with the structure. That's all. I'm not saying that's all he was doing in the sense that I think that like musically he was tapped into something. But my point is that like art is like you get to a place of like an original madness.
Yes.
Where it's like you're doing something for reasons that you could not explain.
Mm-hmm.
That you could not write a blog post about. And this is my frustration where I feel like just spending like 8 years watching people make an income from songwriting classes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you have never written a good song.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying that. I'm not even saying that disrespectfully. I don't even mean that disrespectfully, like as an attack on them.
Versions of
but just
songs,
like, it would be like, it's just like, dude, you've never written a good song. So why would I pay you $100 for your songwriting class?
Mm-hmm.
But I think like the people that we admire are the people who's like what we contextualize as madness pushes them past to a point where they don't care about what people think about them, even though they also do.
Right.
Like there's a human part of them that also very much does.
Yes.
But their like drive pushes them to make stuff that doesn't exist, that they think should exist, and they have a persistence in that sort of original madness to see it through to whatever degree that you can, living in a complex world where you can get run over by a bus on your way to the grocery store.
Right.
And so in that sense, I think like, it doesn't matter if people know who Josh Gaines is, or if like maybe you'll become a very popular writer during your life, and maybe you'll become a very popular writer 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now, and those latter two you won't know.
Right.
But it's like you're still just the dude in your house being like, I mean, this isn't a real story of yours, but it's like, I don't know, what would it be like if somebody had 11 arms? Like, you're still just like, there's something in you that drives that. And I think the faithfulness to whatever that drive is probably the closest that anybody gets to happiness.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a lot closer to happiness than, hey, we came up with this prepackaged thing where you get a job and you jump through these hoops and then you die with your family around your bed. And that's what happiness is.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you had to choose between the two, it's not even close.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, wow. This all makes me feel actually a lot better about my current existence. I don't know about you. I mean, conversations like this are truly helpful, even though to some others' minds, perhaps it sounds really bleak and nihilistic, but yeah. It's a weird sort of zooming all the way out and then recentering to just acknowledging here and now is all that we have.
Yeah.
And
something might happen when you get shot in a Japanese bathroom and something might not.
Right. Yeah. That's probably as good a place as any to just end this.
Yeah.
On the recording side.
Thank you, dude. Thank you for letting me ramble on your show.
Thank you. This was beautiful. Listeners, thank you. I hope you ended this feeling better and not worse. Go make things. It's all fine. We're all good. We're all on the same plane. That's basically the message here.
I guess if we're all in the same boat, it's putting the arc to shame at this point.
Affordable service, plumbing and heating. We're not just good, we're the best. But this episode is not sponsored by that company, but that company is one that exists or used to in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and that was their jingle on their television commercial. Hey, great talk with Tyler. I'm going to go ahead and just get out of here, just signing off. Thank you for listening to Ink and Echo, the show. Thank you for downloading my story, since I know all of you lovely good boys and good girls did that. And hey, listen to this. If you like Ink and Echo so very much that you want to support us financially month to month for as little as $1, please go to patreon.com/inkandecho or get a load of this, inkandecho.com/Patreon. And there you can pledge your support and become one of our patrons. You get access to a whole back catalog of exclusive content, stuff that doesn't get put out on the public show, secret tasty stories about Andy and I, bonus snippets from episodes that don't make the cut, all kinds of goodies. And they just, the goods just keep on rolling. Whatever it is, there's more and more things being added there all the time. So if you like our show, you can give $1 a month and get access to all that stuff. And that is unbelievably helpful. You help cover our costs. You help make Andy and I's lives easier. And we can just keep on doing this show for you and bring you more enjoyment to your earballs. Okay, bye-bye. Ta-ta for now. TTFN. It's what Tiggers do best.